Hello, I'm Mike Henriksen from O'Reilly Media, and today I'm going to be talking with Kate Matsudara, VP
hmm
of Engineering at Decide.com for our Velocity podcast series. And today's conversation is going to center around the human side of performance and operations. Kate, welcome.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Mike.
Sure. So, as a VP of Engineering, you're likely working with lots of technology and people, but which is
Yeah.
easier to tune for better performance?
Well, I think it depends from my point of view or from a person's point of view. Generally, I think that as an individual, you have more control over your performance a lot of the time than you do the technology, especially in bigger companies or where you have existing technology with a lot of legacy code. However, from a management point of view, which is my point of view, I would say that oftentimes it's easier to tune and improve technology than it is people. Um, Mostly because I think that some people, there's all those sayings that you can't change a person, or like don't try to change a man in a relationship or what have you. And I do think that's sort of true. But when people want to change and when people want to be better, I think you can achieve a lot more as an organization than you can with the technology. Great companies. Have you read the book Good to Great, or any of the
Yes.
any of those business books? Right?
Yes.
They all tell you the moral of the story is always more about the people and the culture than it ever is a product or an innovation or an invention. And yeah, and so when I think about performance and getting the most, it's you get the biggest benefit from the people, and I think.
Yes. But they are probably more difficult to tune.
Well, unless they want to, right?
Yes.
Like I think if you can help them want to be better, then you're an amazing leader.
So to achieve performance goals in a company, if you have to make a trade-off between, and these are four variables that I was taught 20 some years ago, that you have time, cost, quality, and scope.
hmm
Which element would you trade off first, and why? What's the reasoning behind which ones you trade off and which ones you don't?
So I think it always depends on the situation, right? Like if you're in a startup and you're running out of money, like cost may not be an option for you. If you're at a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon where you have really deep pockets, then cost is not a factor that you'd even consider. So I think in some ways it's situational. For me personally, if assuming that all of them are equally weighted and I have to pick one, it would probably always be scope. And I think that, the Instagram acquisition is a
Mm-hmm.
great, example of this is by cutting down the amount you do and doing a few things really great, you can build a better product. So if I could only pick one, that would be it, and why.
Yeah, I tend to agree on the quality and the scope seem to kind of go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
You can reduce the size of the project and hence the scope and still keep a high quality, is usually the goal that we try to do. If we start out with, say, someone wants to write a 1,200 page book, and we really don't want that size of book, but we want a good quality 600 page book, the scope has to be adjusted, not the quality.
Well, and I think that's, going like focusing, right? Like you could turn that 1,200 page book into maybe three, pay like
Yeah.
different sections, and then each one can be really focused.
Yes.
And I think that's, you know, um, I read this book once or it was like an article on the automakers, and I think it was that they said if they, instead of building a car that would please 90% of people, if instead they focused on just 10% and doing that really well for that group of people, that they would always sell more cars over and over again. And my favorite example of this is the PT Cruiser, which I still like. I personally like never understood that car, but people love it, and the people who love it, like it's their car. And so, I think that goes to software products too,
Yes.
or books, as you said.
For anything really. I mean, those four variables are across industries. Yeah. So
hmm
you've hired quite a few engineers in your career.
I
So
have.
what do you look for, especially when you think about someone who's going to work in say, a website or a large web property, and you're really looking to have the best experience for your customers, which means high performance as well. So what do you look for?
So, I've actually talked with a ton of hiring managers. So I think I'd like to think that my answer is going to represent a lot of people's opinions, not just mine. But I'll say the very first thing is going to be team fit. And team fit isn't just personality and culture. It's also about your technology skill set and your background and how that fits. For example, if you have a team of all really senior people, a senior person might not be the best fit, right? You might need a more junior person to kind of mix it up, or, so the first thing is always team fit, which kind of goes back to the first original question. That's all about teams. The second thing that I really look for is, I had an old boss call it the fire in the belly, but I think of it as like this drive or this ambition, the thing that this person is going to love to do their job. And everyone's motivated by different things. But what the opportunity that I have for them fits with their motivation and their drive and their goals. Because I think that if you have someone like that, they're going to perform so well for you. And in software nowadays, most people can get jobs anywhere. Like there's so many jobs and talent, great talent's always in high demand. So as a company and as a manager, the best thing you can offer is opportunity, and more than salary, more than benefits, more than anything else. And so that's like the number two thing. And then the third thing, of course, is like skills and smarts and experience. I mean, those definitely are part of it, but the first two come first.
So since there is kind of this is a question that just came up after hearing you, since there's kind of a surplus of companies looking to hire good engineers, do you find yourself kind of selling the company more than having the person sell them, or is it more of an equal balance now to where you're really trying to convince someone, yeah, we're a great place to work?
Well, I think so. I've been really fortunate because the last few companies I've worked at have just been amazing companies that I've never had a big problem recruiting, because I mean, maybe it's because the places I pick are just full of great people and really exceptional. But so, no, I don't necessarily find myself selling the company as much personally, but I do think that helping people pick the right roles is important, because it doesn't, I always say I don't want someone to work here because I convince them, because they're not going to be happy, right? Like it really has to be the right role for them. And so I think if you go into it like that as a hiring manager, you don't find yourself selling, but more around trying to find the right fit.
Yep, that sounds great. So speaking of the right fit, sometimes stakeholders in a company are kind of hard to convince or hard to demonstrate what value the engineers have brought to an organization, especially when you think about you have a website or you have a big web property and you want to make it go a lot faster. How do you demonstrate that, by providing X amount of dollars, we're going to get X increase in performance, which will, in a longer term, result in a lot more happy customers? How do you go about proving something like that?
That's a really great question. And I kind of have two different flavors of an answer for you, because having worked both in like big companies like Amazon and small companies like the SEO Moz and here at Decide, they're kind of different. But at the end of the day, there's really two parts that it comes down to. One is ROI. So at any company that you work at, if there's not a return on that investment in the amount of time that matters, and the amount of time is going to be different at a big company than a small company, right? Because in Amazon, if a bet doesn't pay off for several years, that's okay. In a startup, that's not okay, right? So it's a little bit different. So you have to really think about, is what you're asking going to give positive ROI for the business? And sometimes that can be hard, right? Because I always talk about these refactoring projects, because it seems like developers can refactor their codes forever. And I'm also guilty of that, because you want it to look good, right? And you want it to be maintainable. But sometimes that work doesn't generate value. And so I always say that it's important that everyone is the CEO of their jobs. And if you think about the work that you're doing and say, is this actually give value to our business and our customers? If you look at things under that lens, that's kind of the first step. Because sometimes I feel like it's really easy to get caught up in like a best practice or what you should do when it may or may not actually matter. So, and then the second part of it, so first is, really evaluate what you're asking and understand the ROI and be able to quantify it and articulate it. And you can use that from examples of like other companies or case studies or, a prototype or, there's all sorts of ways you can try and help make that case. But regardless of what company you're in, the second part of this is really about credibility. And so I always advocate to people that when you're talking to your boss or you're talking to stakeholders or when you first get into a job, one of the most important things you can do is build your credibility by finding what I call early wins, but opportunities to demonstrate if you do a project that it has this positive ROI. And this is true even like investing in people, right? Like sending someone to a course or a conference. If you can show that doing that boosts morale and that person then performed even better, then the next time you want to send someone, your boss is going to be like, sure, right? But then your job is to both make sure that you've said, hey, we're going to place this bet and here's what the outcome's going to be. And that then you go and say, hey, and here's what the outcome was. Because your boss won't always, or your managers or the stakeholders won't always see it. So you have to make sure that, if you make a request, that you show the results. And if you do enough of this, then when you want to place a really big bet, if you've built up this kind of bank account of credibility, they'll be a lot more likely to give you those opportunities. And I think that's true no matter where you are. It's sometimes even harder, though, at bigger companies because you have to convince a lot more people and build up that credibility longer. I think about it as if you think about your relationships with people as a series of Polaroids, right? And every interaction you have with them is one Polaroid. And the fewer Polaroids you have, the more important each one it becomes, right? And so when you think about big companies where there's a lot more people influencing those decisions, it's really important that you have enough of those positive Polaroids with enough people to make a difference. And I think that can be really hard sometimes for technologists.
Yes. As you were talking about organizations, and whether they're large or small, how does an organization weigh achieving a really highly performant set of properties versus fully monitored? Are they mutually exclusive, or can you have both? I mean, can you really monitor and maintain and watch every single thing going on and not slow your properties down?
Well, okay, so generally I think that most companies can't have too much monitoring, although I have seen people take it overboard. But generally, you never see someone. Very seldom do you walk into a situation and see they've over monitored. I mean, it can happen and it can hurt performance, but most of the time you walk into situations and you're like, wow, there's no monitoring on any of these things. I think the most important thing with monitoring and performance is also just really thinking about what your goals are. So why do you want monitoring and why do you want alerts, right? Like you want to know if something's going wrong so you can fix it. You want to be able to understand your quality of service. You want to prevent problems before they occur, right? There's all these great reasons. So what does that mean? That means that you have to have enough that you can achieve those goals. And enough really depends on your business, right? If you are a nuclear power plant, you're probably going to have a whole lot more monitoring or maybe like a space shuttle or an airplane, because if you don't, like not having that diagnostic information can be catastrophic. If you're a regular website, I mean, maybe uptime in a few use cases is enough. I mean, I think it really depends. But I mean, there's a reason that there's like debug versions of software that log everything and production versions that don't, right? And I mean, if you think about the fact that minifying CSS and JavaScript and all these things really help with performance of page load times, and there is a lot of value to making things fast, which can mean less logging, less monitoring, but you never want to do it at the sacrifice of quality of service, right? So it all comes down to quality, and fast is a factor in that.
Right. So, one of the things that I've often thought of, if you're doing continuous improvement rather than big, large overhauls of, let's take the site down and let's rebuild it from scratch and start over. This whole idea of continuous improvement, do you think that would help achieve high performance, more competitive in a more competitive environment nowadays?
I do. I actually, I'm a big fan. I mean, like one of my favorite parts, I'm not a big Agile fan in general, like Agile methodologies, but I do, one of the things I loved about them that I think they really brought into a lot of software companies is the notion of these retrospective meetings and really creating and adapting the process to your team and your goals, right? And I think that continuous improvement in software systems is also part of that. And just always looking at, how can we be better? How can we do this more efficiently? And, is it worth doing right now? But even just asking the questions and making a decision and saying, no, this isn't something we're going to focus on, I think is also really important, is like that deliberate what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. Steve Jobs had a great quote I read in his biography, and it said that something, I'm probably going to butcher it terribly, but he said that he was as proud of what Apple didn't do as of what they did do. And I kind of bring this back to the continuous improvement thing because I feel like making decisions about what you're not going to do and what you're going to do in this kind of very iterative, continuous fashion, it allows you to be high performing. It allows you to decide, you know what, we really do need better performance here. And it's not just about software though, and like technology and monitoring, but it's also about people too, right? Like creating a culture where that's a value, not just about your process and your code, but about your people and wanting to be better and having goals and working towards them.
Yes. So, Kate, it's been great talking with you. We forgot at the very first. I was going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional life, and what you're doing at Decide.
Yeah. Well, okay, no problem. So I am currently the VP of Engineering at Decide. This is my third, hopefully successful. My last two are successful startups where I've been a VP Engineering or CTO. Before that, I was at Amazon.com and Microsoft as a developer and a lead and manager. And so I've kind of worked my way up from, writing code and on the people side of things. So, and what we're doing at Decide, I'm really excited. If you haven't seen our site, it's just www.decide.com, and we also have an Android and Apple iPad, iPhone app. And what we do is we help use data to help consumers decide when to buy to help make more informed purchase decisions. So we use like news and rumors and model history and pricing to help determine when new models of things are going to come out, as well as help predict prices. So if you're thinking about buying any sort of consumer electronics or appliances and eventually other categories, you can use our site to help you make more informed purchasing decisions. So we mine, terabytes of data and to help, people, it's kind of applied data mining and machine learning, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's a big data problem.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of the companies I've been talking with are a combination between big data and what we would consider velocity, kind of the web performance and optimization, because usually when you have big data, you're going to start to look at performance issues, and they seem to be going really closely together now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I always talk about how there's a lot of different types of big data. So you have kind of like the crawling of big data, so processing a lot of data really fast in real time. Then there's like the more traditional thing that people think about, like MapReduce and kind of this data crunching analysis part. And then there's also serving up a lot of data quickly. So you think like the search engines and being able to query against all that data, right? And they're kind of they're all big data, but all kind of different. And so we deal with a lot of price volatility. So prices can change every hour. And so being able to update our predictions and actually have that current across millions of products can be a little bit challenging, especially because we don't control that data. So it's definitely a fun problem.
Great. Well, Kate, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Mike.